It all started on a bright Saturday afternoon, one of those rare sunny days where the whole neighborhood seems unusually alive. Barbara, who lived just a few houses down from us, decided to throw a big birthday bash for her granddaughter. Now Barbara was known around here for her colorful parties, balloons everywhere, music that you could hear bouncing off the walls, and a crowd that just didn't know how to keep it down. Honestly, we didn't mind much at first. After all, it was a birthday, and a few hours of noise felt like a small price to pay for a happy occasion. The party ran late into the afternoon, kids running around, laughter echoing, the occasional burst of singing or cheering. By the time it wrapped up around 4 or 5 in the evening, I thought things would settle down. The street quieted. People retreated to their homes, neighbors said their goodbyes. It all seemed pretty normal. But then, just as the sun started dropping, that's when the dogs woke up. Our place, we had 2 dogs that were pretty protective of their little patch of the world. They were used to the daily rhythm, a morning walk, a nap in the sun, and a few stretches of barking at squirrels or the mail carrier. But that evening something was different. The moment the party noise died down, it was like a signal for the neighborhood dogs to start up. I remember looking out the window and counting. There was ours barking sharply along the side path that all the houses fronted, and then, flanking us, the neighbors' dogs, joining in chorus like they were responding to some invisible call. It was a dog symphony, the sharp, unrelenting kind. Normally I'd think, okay, dogs being dogs. But this wasn't the usual routine. This was different. The next evening, Barbara showed up at our doorstep, not exactly ringing the bell politely. She looked upset, her face flushed like she'd been holding in words longer than she should have. She went right into it, telling us that the barking last night had woken her from her afternoon nap. I could see she was really bothered. She wasn't just asking kindly to turn the noise down. No, she was demanding it with sharp words that left no room for small talk. It was awkward because, honestly, we didn't know how to explain the dog's behavior without sounding dismissive. We told her we'd try to keep the dogs quiet, but I remember thinking to myself, how do you silence a dog's instinct? Especially when half the neighborhood's dogs are involved. The pathway where they barked was a shared space, almost like a communal backyard. And sometimes the dogs feeding off each other's energy was something none of us could quite control. Barbara didn't leave us much time to figure it out either. She made it clear she expected changes immediately. And just like that, what started as one loud birthday party turned into a noise complaint, her first step toward what would become a much bigger problem. Looking back, I wish we'd known then that those barking dogs were just the first crack in what was about to become a full-blown neighborhood storm. I still remember when things really started to go downhill with Barbara. At first, it was just the usual sharp words and side glances, annoying but something we figured we could live with. But pretty soon it felt like every time we stepped outside or even tried to enjoy a quiet evening, Barbara was there, loud and hostile. She'd stand right by the fence and start shouting insults. Not just the usual neighborly complaints either. She got personal, casting out hateful jabs about us, our dogs, even my kids. The barking, which had been the original issue, wasn't just a background noise anymore. It became this constant soundtrack to our lives because Barbara seemed to feed off it to ramp up her aggression. I remember one evening when I was out in the yard with my family. The sun was setting, and I was trying to teach my youngest a simple magic trick. But suddenly Barbara's voice cut through the calm, sharp and furious. She screamed from the other side of the fence, "Shut those dogs up or I swear I'll kill them myself." In that moment everything froze. Her words were like ice water, and honestly I didn't know what to do or say. My kids looked at me with wide eyes, confusion and fear mixing on their little faces. I clenched my jaw, swallowing down the panic rising in my chest. Threatening to harm the dogs was one thing, but doing it where my children could hear? It was a new, terrifying level of hostility. We tried to keep our cool afterward, talked as a family about not feeding into her anger, hoping that ignoring her outbursts might make them stop. But the opposite happened. Barbara's attacks only got worse. It wasn't just when we were outside anymore. She started harassing us in ways that felt invasive and relentless. One night I started getting strange phone calls. No one on the line, just silence. Or sometimes faint breathing. At first I thought it might be some weird prank, but it quickly became evident that it was Barbara, or someone she knew, trying to intimidate us. Then came the emails and messages on social media, all filled with offensive comments and threats. She accused us of everything from neglect to animal cruelty, painting this terrifying and false picture of us online. Even some neighbors started asking awkward questions, clearly influenced by her smear campaign. I remember sitting at the kitchen table late one night, scrolling through those hateful messages trying to hold back tears. My spouse and I exchanged worried looks, both of us exhausted and unsure of how to protect our family from this onslaught. It felt like Barbara had made it her personal mission to dismantle our lives piece by piece. Her verbal harassment spilled onto our neighborhood's online forums too. She created posts that were obviously aimed to discredit us and fuel more problems, rallying other neighbors to her side. The community, which used to be quiet and friendly, now felt divided and tense. Every laugh or friendly wave from a neighbor came freighted with suspicion, thanks to the poison Barbara had spread. And still the threats continued. Sometimes it was a shouted insult over the fence at dawn. Other times it was that cold, threatening call in the middle of the night. The stress began to drain us, but I knew we couldn't let it spiral even further. Not when it was starting to feel like our home wasn't a safe place anymore. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just some noisy neighbor dispute anymore. Barbara's behavior had crossed a line. It was harassment, pure and simple. We couldn't just stand by and take it. If anything, what happened next would force us to fight back in ways we never thought possible. With harassment escalating beyond verbal attacks to stalking behaviors, the family decides to take serious action, involving authorities and legal counsel. I remember the moment we realized we couldn't just let Barbara's harassment slide anymore. It wasn't just the barking complaints anymore. That had been bad enough, but now she started showing up at our property, leaving threatening notes, even calling the police multiple times without reason. Honestly, it felt like she was trying to intimidate us into silence. At first, we thought ignoring her might make her go away, but that only seemed to encourage her. So, we decided it was time to fight back, but to do it smart and legally. The first step was reaching out to Barbara's landlord and the real estate agency managing her place. We compiled a detailed log of all the incidents, the false complaints, the harassment, the police visits that ended with no cause for action. Sending that information over wasn't easy. It felt a bit like escalating the drama we just wanted to end, but we knew it was necessary. We wanted the landlord to see that Barbara's behavior was affecting not just us, but the neighborhood's peace and reputation too. To their credit, the agency took the complaints seriously once we laid everything out clearly. Then we contacted the police ourselves, not just to report new incidents, but to make sure there was an official record of each time Barbara caused trouble without cause. Having those reports helped us show the pattern of harassment instead of isolated incidents. It was a frustrating process, having to relive every unpleasant moment to make our case, but the officers we worked with were genuinely helpful. They explained what kind of evidence worked best and encouraged us to get a lawyer involved. That's when we brought in a family friend who practiced law. Honestly, having her guide us made all the difference. She helped draft cease and desist letters, clearly outlining that Barbara had to stop her harassment immediately or face legal consequences. Receiving those letters was apparently a shock for Barbara, but rather than backing off, she doubled down, ignoring them completely. That's when our lawyer suggested we move toward requesting a restraining order. A big step, but one we felt ready to take. While all this was happening, my pregnant girlfriend became a crucial voice in the background. She confided details that none of us had realized were connected. Times she had witnessed Barbara's behavior escalating in ways that validated our concerns. For example, she told us about moments when Barbara seemed to be deliberately provoking our dog, just to create noise and other disturbances. She also shared instances where Barbara made disparaging remarks to neighbors, trying to rally support against us based on rumors and misinformation. Her perspective was eye-opening and, more importantly, it made our case feel airtight. It wasn't just hearsay anymore. It was a collective experience backed by multiple witnesses. Every phone call, every letter, every court process felt like climbing a mountain of stress, but deep down, I knew we were reclaiming our peace. It was empowering to see the community begin to acknowledge what we were going through, and for once, stand with us instead of staying silent. The restraining order was granted eventually, and Barbara was ordered to stay at a reasonable distance from our property and cease all forms of harassment. That milestone sent a clear message. Her behavior wouldn't be tolerated, and there were consequences when you crossed the line. But the most significant shift came a little later, when Barbara's landlord, after seeing all the documented complaints and legal actions, decided to terminate her lease early. The eviction notice was the turning point we had been waiting for. Barbara leaving the neighborhood meant more than just getting rid of a difficult neighbor. It marked the start of restoring the harmony we'd lost. With her gone, the constant tension lifted like a heavy fog. We could finally breathe easy again, knowing that justice had been served and peace would return. But that calm before the storm's end wasn't just a happy ending. It was the beginning of rebuilding trust in the neighborhood. And it all started with standing up and fighting back the right. Honestly, when Barbara and her family finally moved out, it felt like the neighborhood was sighing in relief. For months, their constant harassment had been this dark cloud hanging over our heads. I can still remember the exact moment when the moving truck pulled away from their driveway. It was like a weight had lifted, not only from my shoulders but from everyone's around us. The whole street seemed calmer, quieter, and somehow more hopeful. After they left, new neighbors moved in, completely different from what we'd grown used to. From the first time we saw them, it was clear they weren't interested in any drama. I think that's what made all the difference. They were friendly, genuinely happy to meet everyone, and, most importantly, respectful. They even brought over a little welcome basket, something homemade that instantly made us feel like we weren't just neighbors but part of a community again. It felt refreshing, like the neighborhood had finally reset itself. One of the best parts about the new neighbors, besides their kindness, was how quickly our families started getting along. Our kids bonded right away, playing in the yards without a care, and we adults would chat over backyard fences or during weekend barbecues. It was like everything Barbara's family's toxicity had tried to poison was slowly healing. I even caught myself laughing over silly little things that would have made me cringe before, because honestly life felt lighter. And the dogs. Oh, the dogs were happier too. Without all the tension, their barks turned back into just everyday background noise, not a signal for another fight. It's funny how something as simple as peace in the air can make those little things feel so different. Our own dogs would roam a little freer, tails wagging without a shadow of worry. Reflecting back, I realized that standing up against the harassment wasn't easy. There were moments I doubted whether it was worth the battles, legal or personal. But in the end, defending our home and what we loved was necessary. If we hadn't pushed back, I'm pretty sure the neighborhood would still be stuck in that ugly cycle of fear and frustration. What started as a small complaint about barking dogs turned into something much bigger, and it taught me a lot about boundaries, how important they are and what happens when they're crossed. More than anything, I learned that respect is the foundation of any community. Without it, things fall apart fast. People forget that a neighborhood isn't just houses lined up together. It's people's lives intertwined. And when one person decides to throw the whole thing off balance, it affects everyone. Barbara's eviction wasn't just about removing a troublesome family. It was about restoring harmony to a place people called home. Looking around now, I feel proud. Proud of standing my ground, proud of our neighbors who stuck by us, and proud that we could come out of it with a stronger sense of unity. The neighborhood might have looked the same on the surface, but beneath it there was something new. A bond forged through challenge and ultimately respect. As we settled back into this peaceful rhythm, it became clear that petty disputes can spiral quickly, causing harm none of us expected. So, I guess the real lesson in all of this is that when we respect each other's boundaries, we don't just prevent conflict, we build something better. And that's the kind of peace worth having.